Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 49 of the Game Changers. I'm your host, Carla, and tonight I have a fantastic episode lined up for you. I'm thrilled to welcome our special guest, Larry Schechter. Larry brings a wealth of knowledge and experience that I'm sure you will find enlightening. Joining me as my co host for the evening, the incredible Greg Kellogg. Together, we will dive deep into some engaging discussions and explore fascinating topics. Stay tuned for an insightful and entertaining show. Before I dive into tonight's episode, I want to extend my sincere gratitude to Evan, Iggy, JC, and the TSA team for their invaluable support in providing me with this platform to engage with distinguished individuals within our community. Join me as I explore the lives and stories of my guests, uncovering their personal insights, experiences in fantasy football, and much, much more. The Game Changers is not your ordinary podcast. It had fostered a cherished community, and I'm honored to share this journey with all of you tonight. Who's Larry Schechter? Larry is a renowned figure in the world of fantasy baseball, celebrated for his strategic prowess and attention to detail. Author of the 2014 Amazon bestseller Winning Fantasy Baseball, Larry has earned a reputation as one of the best fantasy baseball player globally. His impressive achievements include winning the CDM Sports National Salary Cap contest twice, outplaying thousands of competitors in 2002 and 2005. Larry has also dominated the most prestigious experts leagues, securing 3 titles in the USA Today sponsored LABR League and 6 in the Tout Wars Expert League. In addition to his success as a player, Larry has made significant contributions as a writer. His book, Winning Fantasy Baseball, is highly rewarded for its in depth analysis and practical advice, helping countless fantasy baseball enthusiasts improve their game. Larry's meticulous research and ability to convey complex strategies in an accessible manner have made his work a valuable resource in the fantasy sports community. He also authored The History of Fantasy Sports, where he utilized his attention to detail in researching and conducting interviews to provide a comprehensive look at the evolution of fantasy sports. Now retired, Larry resides in Florida, where he continues to inspire fantasy sports enthusiasts with his extensive knowledge and experience. I'm honored to have him tonight on the show along with Greg Kellogg. How are you tonight, guys? Nice to see you, Larry.
Great to see you. I'm good. If you see me kind of looking this way once in a while, we got a lot of lightning going on here in southern Florida. It was
Do you guys have
pretty
do you
amazing a
have
little while ago.
do you have a tropical storm there or something?
No, just a really bad thunderstorm. It
Hmm,
was
That's
okay.
crazy.
it was like really bad about an hour ago.
So for those that don't know, Tout Wars and LABR, are the original fantasy sports expert leagues. They were baseball, not football, but they preceded FanX, which Larry wrote about me about FanX. But they preceded FanX by years. And I want to get the first question in because I'm reading your book, Larry, and I'm reading names of people that I've either met or known about for decades. And Bill James is one of them. Now, those that are football guys don't know, but Bill James founded Sabermetrics. And Sabermetrics was a whole new way of looking at analyzing players via in-depth statistics. And it changed things so much that an NFL team actually hired Bill from his night watchman job, I think, to work in their front office to help them analyze players. So my thought is a lot of the stuff I see is micro analytics. You've got ADOT, you've got all these new stats. I got to believe, Larry, that the sabermetrics paved the way for micro analytics in football. Would you agree?
Yeah, what happened is, I mean, you even got to go back before that. Like when fantasy sports started, there was no information. It was hard to even, there weren't even magazines. And so people started writing magazines and then books, and people started doing analysis. And yeah, Bill James sabermetrics, he was doing that for real baseball. He wasn't doing that for fantasy baseball. Ron Chandler, who's very well known, he founded Baseball HQ, and he puts up the Baseball Forecaster magazine. He started getting into analytics, inspired by Bill James, but he also was interested in fantasy baseball, and a lot of his readers were saying, can you do projections and things for fantasy baseball? So Chandler is, probably the first person that really kind of combined fantasy baseball with Bill James type advanced analytics. And then a guy named Aaron Schatz is the guy who really started it for fantasy football. He's the one who started creating, advanced analytics for fantasy football, DVOA, and other things. And then other people, have picked up from there. So now, obviously, there's more than Aaron Schatz that does it. There are other people who do it, and it's spread to other sports: fantasy basketball, fantasy hockey, and for real basketball and real hockey, they also have advanced analytics. Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you take us back to 2002 and share what it felt like to win the CDM Sports National Salary Cap Challenge for the first time?
Well, it felt great, obviously. It was a $25,000 grand prize, which was quite big at the time. I wish I had waited a while and won one of these more modern DFS contests where there's $1 million prize. But it was a little bit, I actually, something made me think about that earlier today, where, it's a little bit of luck involved, or maybe a lot of luck, because obviously I did really well, but it would have been so easy to finish second or third or fourth instead of first. It's like all these big competitions where somebody wins, really big competition, really big prize. It's so close between, second, third, fourth, that it's like you got to do really well to get there, but to actually be number one is a lot of luck also.
Wow, that's awesome. So what strategies did you employ in 2002 and 2005 that helped you stand out among thousands of competitors? So you got the first place, saying that you were so close to everybody else.
My book that you mentioned before, my 2014 book, Winning Fantasy Baseball, when I wrote that book, I decided to just outline all of my strategy for all different formats, and everything is in that book about my strategy for salary cap games, auctions, drafts, snake drafts, every type of fantasy baseball. Although DFS, daily fantasy sports didn't exist then, so that's not covered in there. But you've got to project what you think players are going to produce for the year, their statistics. You have to have an intelligently done value formula where you can take the raw statistics and put them into some type of concrete value. That's one of the big differences between fantasy baseball and fantasy football. In fantasy baseball, there are some point styles games where it's like 1 point for a single, 2 point for a double, that sort of thing. So if you take raw projections, it's easier to figure out what the point value is going to be. But in a lot of fantasy baseball is where you're giving like 12 points for the person with the most home runs and 1 point for the person with the least home runs, and the best batting average gets 12 points and the next best batting average gets 11 points, et cetera. So it's a lot more complicated. There's no easy way of taking raw statistics and saying, well, this player's worth $20 or this player's worth $10 or this guy should be a first round draft pick, this guy should be a fourth round draft pick. It gets complicated. So that's one of the keys And that format is to know how to convert the statistics into the value.
So
Whereas
one of
fantasy,
the things,
most
I'm
fantasy
sorry.
football, I'm sorry, most fantasy football, it's like it's a simple thing because like you get points for touchdowns or yards or whatever. So if you got raw statistics, it's really easy to say, okay, this is how many points I think the guy's going to score.
Yeah. So one of the things I heard about early in my fantasy career was a thing called rotisserie baseball. Can you explain what that is? And is it just fantasy under another name?
Yeah. So let me just get into that by saying a little bit of people who don't know about my new book. My new book is called The History of Fantasy Sports. So I've known for a long, long time that somebody needed to write a book like this. You know, I look at the industry, you got millions and millions of people all over the world playing all kinds of different sports, not just fantasy football and fantasy baseball, but you got fantasy Iditarod, fantasy wakeboarding. I mean, you got fantasy everything. There's more than 50 million people in the US that play fantasy sports. But what a lot of people don't know, but I didn't know when I started writing this book, you got 200 million people playing fantasy cricket in India. So, you know, I look at this industry, how did this all come about? From some people who had ideas years ago. You got this huge industry now. You got, Sirius XM Radio, Fantasy Channel. You got Roto World, Roto Wire, dozens of websites, news services, stat service. I mean, this whole thing. It's like, where did this come from? So I decided, I'm going to write a book about this. So my idea was write the history of fantasy sports and explain how did this all happen, who did what. And as I started to get into it, I learned interesting things about what people did and inspirational things and funny things. And one thing after another, where I realized very early on, okay, if I could just write a book, The History of Fantasy Sports, and tell who did what when, and it would tell the whole story, it would also come off like a very boring research paper. But when I learned these stories, I realized I'm going to tell the stories of these people because there's so much interesting stuff that will make it tell the story, but also be an interesting read, which is what's happened. For example, there's a couple, one of the first statistics services was run by a couple, Jim and Gloria Berger from Pennsylvania. Now I could say, I could write Jim and Gloria Berger, founded as Fast Stats. It was one of the first fantasy statistics services. They were married. They lived in Pennsylvania. 1986 or whatever the year was, they had 10,000 clients or whatever it was. I could just write that. But instead, what I did is I wrote that, but then I added, they would get the statistics from the USA Today on Tuesday and Wednesday. The USA Today put out the American League on Tuesday and the National League on Wednesday, and they had to get the statistics and put them in their computer and spit out the reports to send to their customers. So one Wednesday, Gloria goes into labor with her first child. And they didn't let a little thing like her being in labor stop them from getting the report out. So in between contractions, she would read statistics from the USA Today, and Jim would put it in the computer. And she'd have a contraction coming on. She'd be like, "Oh, wait, another one's coming on. Okay, it passed. Okay, let's continue." And so they got their statistics done. They got the reports out on time, in the mail on time. And now, 37 years later, the girl that was born that day plays in a fantasy football league with her dad.
Wow, what a story. Oh my God.
So it's like there's like dozens and dozens of stories like this in the book. They're funny, they're inspirational, some will make you cry practically or literally. So I tell the whole, I'm going to get to your question in a second. So I tell the whole story of how this all happened. It goes way back years ago, precursors of fantasy sports. Then how did fantasy baseball start? How did fantasy football start? The first commercial games, newspaper games, the first websites, the first magazines, the first books, news services, stat services. Then you get into things like injury experts. Then you later on you get the Fantasy Sports Trade Association. Like the whole story right through daily fantasy sports, worldwide expansion like fantasy cricket in India. The whole thing. So now with that kind of like people who now have kind of like an understanding of what the book is about, I'll get to Greg's question, which is the man primarily credited with inventing fantasy baseball is Dan Okren. And there's a myth that he magically invented this game on a plane trip from Connecticut to Texas. The myth is not true. There's a whole lot more to the story, but he definitely, and there were other people playing like primitive versions of fantasy baseball before him, but he created like the modern version of the game, and he got some friends who wanted to play it, and they met at a restaurant in Manhattan called La Rotisserie Française. That's where they kind of ironed out the rules for the first season. And so they named it after that restaurant. They named it Rotisserie Baseball. And what happened is they, as the game spread, they decided they would trademark the name and try to make some money off of it. And so some people paid them, like $50 a year to have their league be sanctioned by them and get the rules and other things. But most people realize there's not anything that they can really trademark. The rules are simple. So a lot of people, rather than if they want to run their own game or something, rather than paying them for a trademark, they just changed the name from rotisserie baseball to fantasy baseball to get around that. So that's how it went from, it was originally rotisserie baseball, became fantasy baseball.
So Larry, tell me a little bit about what drew you to fantasy baseball. Did you play baseball before? What drew you to it? And why did you write that book?
Well, I always liked sports. I wasn't a very good baseball player. My last year of baseball was my last year of AAA. I was AAA minor league baseball at age 12. I went something like 1 for 14. I was not very good. I'm one of the only little leaguers to ever get thrown out of a game.
Oh boy, what happened?
I didn't like a call that the umpire made, and as I was walking from the dugout to first base, when I got to the umpire, I said, "You should see my dad. He's an optometrist." Which was true. My dad was an optometrist, but that umpire, I tried to keep walking toward first base, and that umpire like grabbed me by the collar and whipped me around and brought me back to my dugout and told my coach he's out of the game.
Oh boy.
Thin skin, just thin skin. Hey, listen, in reading your history of fantasy sports book, I mentioned Bill James in there. But I think his story is inspirational. This guy's a night watchman, and he says he'd spend 5 minutes making sure everything was okay, nothing exploded. Yep. And then he came up with sabermetrics, which got him a real NFL job. I mean,
you mean an MLB job?
MLB, right? Sorry, yeah. MLB job. Is there anything more inspirational than changing your life? Night watchmen are minimum wage guys. Mm-hmm. Guys that work in the front office of a Major League Baseball team are not.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he became, he became a legend basically. And there's lots of other stories like that in the book. Like there's a guy, Peter Pizarris, and his friend. They got an idea to start one of the first stat services, and they worked 23 hours a day to launch their service in an apartment in New York that should have been condemned. There was like no hot water. They would take 30-second freezing showers. They had to like sleep by their computer to get any kind of warmth. Occasionally a mice would run over them while they're sleeping, and it was disgusting. And this guy worked 23 hours, and he says, like, it sounds like hyperbole, but it's not hyperbole. They really did it in order to get this thing launched. And as it turned out, it became huge. It became Commissioner.com, which was later sold to CBS Sportsline, and became the whole basis for CBS Sportsline fantasy sports, commissioner service. and they made millions of dollars in the process.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I know it's her turn, Carla. Sorry, I
You're fine.
got to ask you, what made you write? I mean, you're a player, you have a career. You weren't an author to begin with, were you?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't, and I still don't really consider myself an author. When I was young, like a teenager, and in college, I wanted to write the great American novel.
Nice.
And I did write something, which I can honestly say is a piece of crap. But yeah, years later, I decided to write this book about fantasy baseball strategy, and then I wrote this other book, which is not a piece of crap. It's great. It's great not because I came up with something great, but because of all the information that I learned. I spent hours and hours and hours of research and interviewed dozens and dozens of people. I thought when I got into it, I thought it's something I could knock out in a few months, and I was crazy. It took 18 months of full-time work. So I want everybody to get this book and read it. The reviews are fantastic. If you go on Amazon and look at the history of fantasy sports, Larry Schechter, you'll see the reviews by the customers are fantastic. The editorial reviews are fantastic. People love it. They say it's easy to read.
Larry, it's a bestseller. It is a bestseller. That tells you it's a good book. I mean, it is. I mean, it's a page turner. It's got so much in it. It's inspiring. I got to tell you, I'm honored to be part of it, even a small part of it. So I want to thank you for that.
Nice. So talking about the book, Larry, who inspired you to write the history of fantasy, sports? And can you describe a little bit your research process of the book, and how did you gather and verify the information?
Yeah. Well, I said before, like I would just look at the industry and go, like, where did this all come from? I look at the world like that too. I look at the world sometimes and go, yeah, my God, you got these skyscrapers and airplanes flying in the sky, and you turn on the TV and you can see something happening in Brazil. I mean, it's like, how did this all happen? It's like if it worked to me, we'd all still be rubbing two sticks together in caves to make a fire. So I look at as I said earlier, I look at the fantasy industry the same way. Like, you got millions and millions of people playing all over the world, and every sport, and the news services and the analysts and everything. It's like, how did this happen from some ideas people had years ago? So that's where where the inspiration came. There's never been a book like this, and it's something that was needed. And the people, a lot of the people who I talk about in the book, what they did is they saw a need for something that didn't exist, or maybe it existed, but they thought they could do better. Like Ian Allen, for example, Ian Allen and Bruce Taylor, who started Fantasy Football Index magazine, which is one of the most successful, longest running fantasy football magazines. That started as a college project. And it started because, hey, fantasy football is great, but there's no information. Let's start a magazine. And other people would say, when computers started to come around, people who, the early people who learned computers would say, geez, in fantasy football, it takes our commissioner like 8 hours a week to do all statistics. We got this thing now called a computer. I'll bet we could do this on a computer a lot quicker. And they did. So they'd start a stat service. And all these different people were doing this in all different aspects of fantasy. And when I finished the manuscript, and I sent it to my editor, after the editor went through it for the first time, he suggested you should have an epilogue to kind of wrap it all together, because I didn't have an epilogue. And I thought, okay, that's a good idea. It doesn't have to be anything long, it can be pretty brief, but I should do that. So I started to think of ideas for what do I want to write the epilogue. And when I was thinking about that, I realized I had just done the same thing all these people had done. I saw a need for something that didn't exist, so I did it.
That's awesome. It's like any name. I know that Greg was saying that his name is in the book. Any name out there that you want to share that struck you and was like, oh my God, they did something different for the community. They did something different in the fantasy football. You want to share with us that you want people to look in the book and see them did something different in the fantasy football community.
Well, there's lots of people in the book, but what I will do though, I'll go back. Another thing that you asked that I didn't answer is about like how did I research and verify things?
Yes.
Okay, so I would Google one article after another about, I started, certain topics, kind of one topic at a time. I'd Google one article after another. I interviewed dozens of people, mostly over Zoom, so I could record the interview and then later watch it back and write what I needed to write. And it was kind of maddening because I would learn something and that would send me down 4 more rabbit holes. Or I would hear something and then I would see conflicting information, like you're talking about verifying things. A lot of it was difficult. Where like, I'd be talking to somebody. Sometimes I felt like I was a detective, talking to a suspect or a lawyer doing a deposition. I'd be like, okay, you just told me X, Y, and Z, but an article in 1982, you said ABC. Were you lying then or are you lying now?
Oh boy.
Wow. People have a hard time remembering stuff from years ago. I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. So, if somebody said something in an article 20 years ago, I would take that as, the accurate information. But there were some things that were hard to verify. There's sometimes I would hear a story and go, oh my God, that story is great. That's definitely going to be in the book. And then later on, I find out, no, that wasn't even true. That guy either made it up or exaggerated. It's not true. So that happened.
Yeah.
A lot of it was exasperating.
I want to ask you about the process.
It took 18 months. Yeah.
I want to ask, you say you Googled you've got your book laid out very nicely with different chapters and they're all well defined and everything. But finding the people isn't always easy to connect with the people. How did you arrange these interviews? Did your editor set it up? Did you do it on your own? And is there any one person that connected you with several other people that you want to call out?
Well, no, I didn't have an editor until after the manuscript was done. I did it all myself. Just Googling people, trying to find people on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. A few people I knew, and I could ask them like, hey, do you know this other guy? I had to contact him. And then when I would get in touch with somebody, I would ask them about some other people. So it was a lot of that. There are a few people I wanted to get in touch with that I couldn't. In fact, Bill James was one. I reached out to Bill James a few times. He did not respond. And there's plenty of information about Bill James out there, so I didn't really need to talk to him. But I only had like a couple questions I would have asked him if I could have got a hold of him. Let's see. There was something else you said I wanted to comment on. Like for example, when I started looking at the history of fantasy football and how that all started. So there's a guy named Bill Winkenbach that is the main person who invented fantasy football. But then there's this other guy, Andy Musolimas, who was in the original league that Winkenbach created. And Andy Musolimas is the guy primarily responsible for actually spreading fantasy football. So, looking at a topic like that, now those two guys happened to, passed away a while ago, so I couldn't talk to them. But I would Google, I'd read article after article after article after article. And for example, like Andy Musolinas, for example, I would read 20 articles and it's like, okay, now I'm reading 98% of this stuff I'm reading. I've read 20 times already, but every once in a while, I would get this little piece of new information I hadn't seen before. And one of the most amazing things in that regard was on Musolinas, because after like 15, 20 articles, I finally came to one where I found out something hadn't been mentioned before. The guy was a frickin' war hero. He was 17 years old when Pearl Harbor happened. He volunteered for the Army. He volunteered for a mission where behind enemy lines, the recruiter said 97% of you are not going to return alive. He did it anyway. And, so spreading fantasy football is like insignificant compared to that.
That's crazy.
No, I wouldn't say that. What he did may have had more significance to some people, but
you're just glad he survived.
Millions of lives, yeah.
Yeah, and now I actually tracked down one of his grandchildren on Facebook. The guy thought I was some kind of weird, crazy stalker or something at first. I kind of convinced him, like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And finally, I did a Zoom interview with. I got a little bit of information from him that I hadn't gotten in various articles and stuff.
Nice, that's amazing. Greg, do you wanna take one of the sponsors?
Oh, sure. Sports Affiliation, like anybody else, pays the bills, and we do it because we're sponsored by Locker. Locker is live fantasy games. It's the world's fastest growing live fantasy application. You can experience the thrill of real-time decision-making and transform your football knowledge into real money, okay? We've got a league at the Sports Affiliation. You can join for $25. The current pot is $443, and it doesn't matter if you start late. You can still catch up. Trust me on this. I'm in a league with the Fantasy Cares organization. It's a $10,000 prize pool, and I started late, and I only did 2-3 games, and I'm in 4th place right now in that league. So you can do it. You can do it, and all you have to do is download the Locker for iPhone or Android, and you find it in the App Store. And this isn't in the script, but you find it in the App Store under Locker Fantasy Sports. And I just talked to the CEO, and we're going to try to get him on Carla's show. So she'll be doing to Noah what she is doing to Larry tonight. So, Locker.
Hopefully not doing a lot of bad stuff like Greg told you. So,
Greg
Larry,
I suppose Greg did a great job going off script. Much better.
I know. You always say that I'm putting I take a lot of bad stuff. I do bad stuff.
Larry, I'm always off script. I'm always off script.
Yeah, I was going to say, like Trump, Biden, and Kamala, when they go off script, they sometimes get in trouble, but you did great.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, Larry, I know not everybody can write, but if you have the ability to write, can anybody do what you did if they have the gumption and the work ethic? Because you said it took longer than you expected.
Well, I mean, you gotta have some writing ability. I mean, yeah, I guess I have pretty good writing ability, somewhat. But for this, I couldn't write like a fiction novel or something.
Well, I don't know. You might be able to. You just have to have the right idea.
Yeah. I don't think. I mean, that's just kind of a different set of writing skills that I don't think I really have, and I'm never going to find out. I have no interest in trying that. I mean, this was enough, because now I'm still working full time now, promoting the book and letting people know about it, trying to get it in bookstores and get book reviews and everything I need to do. Because if I don't do this, it's not going to happen. No one's going to do it for me. So it's basically, what I've done is I'm now past the 2-year mark since I started this, and it's become like a full-time job for 2 years, and it's going to continue indefinitely.
Well, do you enjoy doing that, or would you rather write a follow-up book?
Oh, there's not going to be a follow-up book.
No.
Oh, it's such a great book.
I mean, maybe in 10 years, but it was a lot of work, to the point where it's like I know it's great from what everybody's saying about it, and I knew as I was going along, I knew, oh my God, this is going to be great, because when I found out different stories, I just like, this is going to be freaking great, you know, and and I was right, based on what everybody's saying about it. But it's been a lot of work. I had to give up a lot of things. I was, kind of happily retired, and now I got a full-time job all of a sudden for 2 years and counting. So I did it really for the fantasy community. So I need the fantasy community to support this. Buy the book. If you're too busy right now to read it, just buy it now. Get and read it when you have time. Tell people about it. Tell everybody you know who likes fantasy about it. I need the support. It's available. It's available ebook and paperback. Most major booksellers' websites have it. Even a lot of independent bookstores have it on their website. And Amazon, of course, Amazon is like easy to get it, and that's where you can see lots of reviews and details about it.
What do you hope readers will take away from your book, Larry?
I think, the biggest takeaway is fantasy sports are great. The reason why it went from these ideas people had years ago to where it is now is the simple fact that fantasy sports are great. People love it, and it builds relationships between coworkers, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters. You got a guy like Mark Mariani, who worked for CBS Sports and Turner Sports. His first job in Chicago, somebody invited him to be in a fantasy football league. He had never heard of it before, and it was like a company league. And when this guy invited him to be in the league and told him about it, Mark realized, if I join this league, I can call my boss's boss in the fancy office in Manhattan, and this guy will pick up the phone and talk to me about a trade or whatever. Whereas ordinarily, this guy wouldn't take a phone call from Mark in a million years. So he joined the league. And then you got people like at the NFBC fantasy football draft in Vegas, where you got a guy says, on one side at this draft table, on one side of me, I got the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. On the other side of me, I got a plumber, and the two of them are talking like they're best buddies. And so it brings people together. Emil Tadlick, who unfortunately passed away. I got a few quotes from him in the book. One of them is, I think it says something like, people need a hobby. Fantasy football is a beautiful hobby.
Nice.
Emil is a dear friend, and he changed my life. Truly. One year I did fantasy football full time. I worked for Fox Sports 1 year. But primarily, it was a hobby for me. It wasn't a job. And Emil published me in his magazine. He had 3 magazines, maybe 4 at one point.
Yeah.
And Bob Harris and Emil were such good friends. And Bob is very dear to me as well. You talk about it changing your life. I've got friends that if I needed a shirt off their back, they would give it to me, and they're friends because of fantasy football. You can't say that about jobs. You can work with a guy for 20 years and not know his wife's name. But in fantasy sports, you get to know these people and they get to know you. And I got to tell you, to me, it's the greatest thing in the world, short of my family.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole community that's evolved from fantasy. And the
Did
book.
you ever go, Larry, to the expo?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Did you ever went to the Fantasy Expo in Ohio?
No, I didn't really know about it until this year is when I really kind of found out about it from through Greg and some other people. And next year I may very well be there. I'd like to be there.
You should get a booth, and you You should have your
your book?
books there, and you should be willing to autograph them. Lots of pens, because I think you could sell a ton there. I really do.
Well,
700
I agree.
people.
I hope everybody that goes to the expo next year will have already bought the book by then.
Well, I hope
Yeah,
so
and we
too.
want to have your signature.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know why
talking
they
about
want
the expo. Talking about the expo, I saw Bob Lung saying something today, and I want to share it with everyone. So he was saying that a year ago today, his daughter and her husband adopted two amazing kids. And even though today is his birthday, so I want to wish him happy birthday. He cherished this day from now on to, and he called it Happy Adoption Day for his two beautiful, kids. He have a beautiful picture with them, and I love these two kids beyond comprehension. So I want to share this picture with you guys. We all know Bob Long. We all know his family, what they do for the community. I just want to say happy birthday to him for today, and happy adoption day, and thank you for everything that you do for the community. So you should,
And
Larry, really
thank you,
Bob.
Pam, for taking care of Bob, because Pam
Yeah,
is
and Pam is amazing. I love her. I love the family. I get to know the whole family. Their kids as part of the expo, and I have a great connection with everyone. And I love seeing all of them, and talk to everybody when I go there. So it's a family connection more than it's just business. It is a family, and I agree with that. And Larry, you will have so much fun going to the expo.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead,
labor and tout wars are like that. The USA Today Experts League Labor and the other Experts League Tout Wars. It's like that. We go to a draft, in person, except for COVID. It's always been in person, and it's like you got a whole weekend with these people who have become friends, and if there's a new person by any chance, like they're taken in immediately. And we'll go out to lunch together. Somebody will have a party maybe at night, and it's a whole community thing. It's great.
I agree. This is how I met Greg, honestly. I met him at the expo. I met a lot of great people at the expo. And this is how I got into the podcast and the fantasy football, even though I don't play. But it's just an amazing,
we're working on that. We're working on that.
It's an amazing community, Larry. You should go to the expo and be part of it. I would urge you to go at least 1 year. Whoever didn't go, I would urge them to go at least 1 year. So, what were some of the key players in your championship teams? Do you want to share with us what were your key players in your championship teams?
Which championship team?
Do you want to share about the baseball? Maybe baseball, because I do believe you won twice victories.
Like in 2000, like in 2002 or 2005.
Yeah, 2002 and 2005. If you want to share anything.
I don't think I remember. I'd have to look that up.
No?
I think I probably have a file somewhere with that. I think, but I could not tell you offhand.
Well, I got to ask you a question. Did you ever have on your fantasy team Mark Fidrich?
Oh.
My favorite baseball player of all time, because he talked to the ball.
I don't know. I might have. I don't know. But yeah, one of my favorites was Pedro Martinez. Favorite. What?
Was he with the Red Sox?
Yeah, the great pitcher with the Red Sox. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and he was one of my favorite real life pitchers, and one of my favorite, to have on a fantasy team.
What's your favorite stadium you've been to? I assume you've gone to some games.
I haven't been to too many stadiums. Fenway Park would be my favorite, because I'm a Red Sox fan, and I was a season's ticket holder for 3 years at Fenway before I left Boston.
They had Fenway the Red Sox for the military. I was stationed at Fort Devens for a while. And when Detroit would come to town, because I'm a Michigan guy, I would go down and you could get the left field bleacher seats for like $2.50 on a military discount.
Yeah.
So for $2.50, I could go, and I was right next to the bullpen for the visiting team, so I could talk to the Tiger pitchers. I love Fenway Park. The Green Monster is amazing.
Yeah,
I want to go back in time.
I got a tour. I got a tour where we went in the Green Monster, and I remember sitting in the center field bleachers one game where Jim Rice almost broke my face.
With the ball?
Yeah, with a ball. Yeah, I was in the center field bleachers, and his home run hit the ledge. Like if it had been like a foot shorter, it would have been off the very top of the wall. But it hit right on the top of the ledge, and it went whizzing by my face, like this close to my face. If it had been like this much more to the side, it would have been right in my face. And I don't know.
Larry, do you watch Friends?
Hey, Larry, can you imagine being a pitcher and having a Rice liner come right at your head?
Oh my God!
And you throw up your glove, just throw it up to deflect it or catch it. The reflexes these pro athletes have is amazing.
Yeah, and once in a while it hits them in the face, which is not good.
No, it's not good.
But that reminds me of another, the book. I said there's like dozens and dozens of really good stories in the book. And one of them is a guy named Jim Serra ran one of the first commissioner services for football, and he was
part of Fantasy Insights.
Right, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, but this particular story, one of the he knew that one of his customers in one of the fantasy football leagues was an all-star pitcher, who I'm not going to name, but it was a well-known all-star baseball pitcher was in this fantasy football league. And so one night, Jim Serra, in like September, baseball's still going on, fantasy football started. So Jim Serra is watching a baseball game on TV, and he's monitoring his website to make sure everything's working properly. This all-star pitcher gets taken out of the game in like the 7th or 8th inning, goes to the locker room, and within minutes, before he could have possibly taken a shower or anything, Sarah notices this guy made a move on his fantasy football team.
Hey, we players take this sport serious.
Exactly. It is serious.
Okay, so Larry, you asked me a question when we were on the side, and you told me if I live in Connecticut because you have a story for me. Do you want to share that story?
Yeah, well, this isn't this is a pretty good story. It's not like one of my best stories, but I just thought of it because you live in Connecticut. When I was much younger, in my 20s, I briefly dated this girl from Connecticut. I can't remember, it was either New Haven or Hartford. And
I teach in New Haven, so we will say New Haven.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact detail, but anyway, I do remember her name. That's good. But she told me about something that happened, which is when she was about 15 years old, she was kidnapped along with 2 younger kids who were like much younger. And the 3 of them were kidnapped. And it turned out that the other 2 kids were the kids of the local mob boss. And a rival mob boss kidnapped them. And this girl that I dated just happened to be next to them at the same time and got taken by mistake. But many hours later, or maybe it was a day later, I don't remember, they were rescued. And the girl that I dated, being like 15 or whatever she was, she had helped these 2 younger kids get through this ordeal and kind of remain calm and get through the ordeal okay. So the local mob boss tells her, like, I'm so grateful for your help. From now on, I'm going to treat you like my own daughter. Wow. So she had like this local mob boss treating her like his own daughter from then on, which is quite interesting.
And you dated her?
I dated her brief. It was brief. It was brief. We weren't a great match. It was pretty brief. But one thing is, after I heard this story, I thought, geez, like I hope nothing happens where I break her heart, because I might have a couple of guys come break my legs.
Yeah, you might.
Yeah.
Oh
But
my God. You should have been in a movie, Larry, with that story. Oh my God.
no, she
I
should have
wanna
been in the movie.
something else.
I want to get back to the book. I want to
Yes.
know, how did you find a publisher? You said you didn't have one going in, so you write the manuscript. How do you shop a manuscript once you've got it?
Well, I was going to use the same publisher that I had for Winning Fantasy Baseball 10 years ago. But then, kind of like at the last minute, I decided to self-publish.
Wow.
How do you
Yeah.
do that?
Oh.
Well, you get an editor, you get cover designer, typesetter, interior designer. You just kind of do all those things yourself, and you can upload it on Amazon. You can upload it on other book distributors. Yeah, it's much more common now. It's not something that really existed very much 10 years ago. There's advantages and disadvantages of self-publishing or going with another publisher if you can get a publisher.
What's one of the biggest advantages of self-publishing?
You have total control over what happens.
Okay, fair enough.
That makes sense.
But there are disadvantages too.
You got to do all the work.
Yeah.
That's one of them. Yeah.
And put the money into it too, which is
Yeah.
something else. So how do you balance being a player, writer, and expert in the field, Larry?
I'm not balancing it too well right now. The thing is, I've been so busy that this is the first time in about 30 years I'm not playing season-long fantasy football. I was just too crazy busy over the summer to do my normal preparation. And I'm not going to just do something like really half-assed. So, yeah, that's why. I want people to
outdoors and labor.
Yeah. Although, actually, that's winding up. Hasn't gone too well this year. My baseball teams did not do very well this year.
So, how has retirement been treating you, and what do you enjoy doing in your free time?
Well, that's the thing. I screwed up my retirement by starting the book. I mean, I play golf. I play golf. I play fantasy sports, but it suddenly basically end up with this full-time job for 2 years. I've given up dozens of rounds of golf. I haven't taken a vacation. I've given up other things, to get the book done and now to promote it and whatnot. So I'm not really retired anymore. It's like I have a job again. When I was writing, during part of the time I was writing the book, I used to play golf probably 3-4 times a week. There's a group of guys that I would play with, and we'd play, and afterwards we go to happy hour, and my 3 to 4 times a week, and then going to happy hour because of the book became a lot of playing 9 holes twice and then leaving. And so they started calling me 9-hole Larry.
Oh my God. You should have that on your Twitter. 9-hole Larry.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Oh my God.
And I said, when I'm done with the manuscript, you'll know, because I'm going to come out and I'm going to play 18 holes and go to happy hour.
Hey, Larry, have you promoted your book overseas anywhere?
That's a good question.
Not specifically. I will work on that. I haven't done that specifically, although I know there have been a handful of copies bought in Australia. One was brought in Brazil. So I know some of the places that I'm promoting it, do reach elsewhere. The thing is, there's so much I could do to promote it. I mean, I could literally sit at my desk 24/7, not sleep. Not that I'm going to do this, but I could 24/7, not sleep, not eat, not do anything else, just do various things to promote the book for like months. There's so much I could do potentially, but that's why I need help. I need people to spread the word. Anybody you know that likes fantasy is going to love the book. In fact, the people that don't even play fantasy have liked the book. I've already gotten a few people who read it and loved it. They don't play fantasy because the thing is, it's not. It's like my first book was about like fantasy baseball strategy. And a lot of that you can apply to other fantasy sports for like, fantasy football or whatever for strategy. But somebody who doesn't play fantasy sports is not going to be interested in that book. Whereas this, this isn't so much about fantasy sports as it is the stories of people that are fascinating. So a lot of people have loved the book, even though they don't play fantasy sports. The Midwest Book Review, I'm not sure who did the book review for the Midwest Book Review, but the review said fascinating from start to finish.
Nice.
In
Learning
fact,
about
I should ask them. I never thought of this. I'm going to ask if they could tell me the person that did that review, do they play fantasy sports? I'm going to see if I can find that out.
Yeah, we can find that out.
I want to thank you for coming on, Larry. I mean, this is wonderful. It really is.
It is. I just have a couple more questions for you, Larry. So, talking about the expo, and now that Greg put the expo into your head a little bit, do you have any future projects, any upcoming projects, any books or something that you're working on?
Well, there's nothing else I'm working on besides this. I'm trying to get some of my life back, like playing golf, and I want this to be the only time I don't play season-long fantasy football. I've played. The first 2 weeks I've played a little bit of daily fantasy football. The first time I've ever done daily fantasy sports. But I have a book signing coming up. If anybody listening to this happens to be in Southern Florida this Saturday from 1 to 3, I'm going to be at the Barnes & Noble in Plantation in the Broward Mall.
That's nice. And
Larry,
we usually
you should get in the locker. You should join our locker league because it's game day, and it's not really fantasy. It's predicting what's going to happen in the actual game, but it's fun. You should join it.
Yep. I'll take a look at it.
And before I end up, I usually ask my guests if they have any secret they want to share with me or any story that they never heard before. So Larry, did you have ever do you have any story you never shared before you want to share on the show?
I have to think about that. Nothing comes to mind. It's not something I never shared that I want to share.
You really want something that you don't want to share.
I'm thinking there's things I'm thinking of that I have shared at least a little bit. I like Cocoa Puffs. I'm not afraid to admit it.
I love it.
2% or full milk?
With what?
2% or full milk? Whole milk, 2%, skim.
Oh, yeah, 2%. Yeah. Might have started with whole milk years ago, though. I used to do whole milk. Yeah.
Mel likes this one.
Something that not everybody knows about me is I used to do stand-up comedy for about 5 years. I did stand-up comedy.
Really? Stand-up comedy? I would have never known that you did stand-up comedy before. That's amazing.
Where did you perform?
Yeah.
Mostly in upstate New York. I lived in the Albany, Schenectady, Saratoga area for a long time. So it was mostly around there. Occasionally I went down to New York City, and that was different. I remember the first time I performed in New York City, what I did is I did guest spots, and sometimes I was a feature. I was never a headliner, but I would host or do the feature. This guy does 30 minutes.
That's
so the first time I went to New York, before I went up, the host comes out. The host starts talking to people in the audience, where are you from and whatnot. And I realized in Manhattan, half the audience is from out of the country. They're not even from the U.S. They're from other countries, half of them. So I get up there, it's my time. I get up there and I'm doing these jokes that a lot of them, if you don't live in the US, you don't know what I'm talking about. So I would get to a punchline and like half the room would laugh and the other half would be silent. And I was like, they don't know what I'm talking about.
Oh my God, Larry, we don't want to finish this episode. That was really informative and amazing. And you're so knowledgeable. We cannot thank you enough. So I'm gonna just talk about one of our sponsors as well, and then we will talk more. This episode is proudly sponsored by Better Takes. For those who engage in sports betting and seek a competitive edge, Better Takes is the first app designed to analyze your betting history, allowing you to identify your strengths and weaknesses. By understanding your betting patterns, you can refine your strategy, whether you excel with favorites or underdogs. Download the app for free on Apple or Android. Thank you for Better Takes. So before I conclude, Larry, could you please let our audience know how they can connect with you and where they can find your books on social media? And I know that it's on Amazon. Is it somewhere else as well they can find your book? Can you please share with us?
Yeah, well, connect with me. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, Larry Schechter. The book is on Amazon. Most major booksellers' websites, they have it either paperback or ebook. A lot of independent bookstores have it available. If you like your local independent bookstore, they can get it for you. Probably they can order it. That's pretty much it. And if you want to get more details, see the table of contents, read a bunch of reviews, the place to do that is on Amazon.
Larry, you just made a sell.
Mel
just ordered your book.
I did what?
Yep.
You just made a sell. Mel just ordered your book.
Oh.
Thank you, Mel. Right, that's amazing. Yeah. Greg, do you have anything else to say, please?
Again, just thank you. Follow Larry on Twitter. And if you've got stories about sports, share them with Larry. You never know. It might end up in a book 10 years from now.
Yep, you never know. Thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Game Changers. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Larry Schechter and gained valuable insights into his world and the world of fantasy football and baseball. Thank you, Larry, for sharing your expertise, life lessons, and wisdom with us. We appreciate you. Join us for the next episode of the Game Changers on Wednesday, September 18th, when I welcome Dustin Lotke as my special guest. Thank you as well, Greg, for allowing me tonight with your presence and co-hosting the Game Changers. I also want to express my gratitude for Evan, JC, and Iggy and the TSA team for their continued support and for providing me with this exceptional platform, sharing my guests' authentic stories and experiences. A special acknowledgement for JC for his invaluable contribution behind the scene. Your efforts are deeply appreciated. Do not forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more viewers like you. Follow us on social media to stay updated on upcoming episodes and join our community, the Sports Affiliation, where everyone is welcome. Until next time, keep challenging the game and making your mark. This is Carla signing off. Have a great evening. Goodbye.